Sometimes I get these crazy harebrained ideas in my mind that I'm going to build a fireplace, or I want to kind of replicate a street lamp, and then I'll just set my mind to doing it, and that's what happens. So this time around, I was inspired by this Howard Miller very expensive clock. It was, I think, originally retails for around $3,000. On sale, you can get it at the bargain price of $2,300. But I wanted to see if I could do it for under $100. So that's what we're gonna do on today's episode, and we'll see how it turned out. So the first thing I did is I needed to find like a clock face that really spoke to me, kind of replicated that. And I saw one in the Hobby Lobby clearance aisle for about $10. It was 90% off. It was originally retailed for $100. It was a little worse for wear. Anybody else might have walked on by, but I'm like, I bet we could fix that up. Let's see if we can make this work. So the first thing we're gonna do is remove the clock face, and then we can make the repairs to the frame portion. So we're gonna just pull this off. Okay. So there's some damage here, but we're gonna, like I said, put this back in the frame, but we're gonna set this aside because we've got some stuff to do and we don't want that to get damaged. Okay, I'm gonna remove any nails. So let's assess the damage here. I think before I cut off this, I want to repair these cracks. So I am going to just fill it with wood glue, and it doesn't really matter if we kind of make a mess because we're going to be painting this anyway. So work that in. This is probably the most damaged area, is this one side right here. Then we're going to just clamp this in tight, and you can see how it's going to squeeze out that glue, and I'll do more clamps. And then I set that aside to fully dry while we moved on to the main part of the clock. The first thing that I did is I took some 1x pine material, and I will caveat going into this, if I were to do this again, I think I would have just bought a 4x8 foot sheet of plywood, a nice like birch or something like that. I think it would have been more affordable and more economic in the end, but I ended up just buying a 1x12 for the front, by 8 feet tall, and then I got two 1x8 by 6 feet tall pieces of pine, and I really picked through to try to find the clearest one. Like I said, I think if I were to do this again, I would have gone the 4x8 foot sheet of plywood because I ended up needing a piece of plywood anyways. And so what I did is I left them at those depths. So if you decide to replicate this, those are the depths. Is about 8 inches deep, which, let's be honest, the measurements aren't always exact. I think they're doing that to save money. But a 1x8 is really like 1x7.5 or something like that. But I would still go with the 8 inches. And then the 1x12 in the middle. And I cut off the excess. The total height that we were going for is 72 inches. That's why I went with the 6 foot side pieces. But I cut off that long piece on the top just to have that for another part of the clock in just a bit. But what we're gonna do is then I took it on my table saw and mitered the edges. Now, if this part makes you nervous, you could do a total butt joint and just join them like this with nails. I really do think that mitering the edge gave it a nice, cleaner look in the end. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I'm super dirty. We are about ready to glue and nail these together. They're mitered, see, and they'll fold up just like so. It's about ready to storm, so hopefully we can still work since we're under the tent. But it's going well. I'm super excited, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. So what we're gonna do is we are going to glue these together, and I've got these corner clamps that I'm hoping will help. So we'll just give this a go. Okay, we're gonna see if this works. That seems to work. Okay, now I want to flip this over because I think I want the nails to go in through the front side. And I just want to make sure this is nice and tight. Okay, now we're going to switch this to the other side. Okay, now we're back to the clock face and we want to start the process of being able to attach it. But the first thing we need to do is cut down. It had this wood beaded trim on the outside, which would have gone well with my mirror in my living room area, but it did not go for the look that I was going for. So we're gonna take just a compass and we are going to trace a circle. But before we do that, because we're gonna be cutting through it, I felt like we needed to pull these off and we're gonna have support. So we're gonna just hope these pry right off. They should. Yep, it looks like they're coming. We're gonna flip this over. This looks a little worse for wear, but I promise in the end it will look good. Okay, so we're gonna set this on 8 centimeters or 3 inches. Okay, so now we're gonna start by drilling a pilot hole because this has wire in it. So we're gonna drill a pilot hole. We drilled a hole, cut around that as best I could, keeping it as circular as I can. And then we did a pretty good job. But any imperfections I fixed by when I sanded it out. I sanded off the edges and try to get that as even looking as possible. Okay, so we've got our basic frame built and I've set our clock head on top to kind of get a feel for how it's gonna look. I'm excited. We do need to cut out a hole right here to accommodate like the battery and the mechanics of our clock. So that's what we're gonna do right now. Then I've got some trim ideas and then I've got a hard thing that I'm gonna try to do. I've never done it before. Well, they make it look easy, but I have a feeling it's gonna be a challenge. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. In the meantime, we're gonna cut a hole so this sets flush down and then we'll go to that point. First thing we need to figure out is how big this is. I'm gonna make it bigger just to give us some wiggle room. And it's like just shy of 2.5. That's like 2 1/4 each way. I'm gonna cut it like 4 inches just because. And then we're gonna measure 6 and 10, and then half is 11.5, so 5 3/4 is middle, and then we're gonna do 4 and 8. That way we've got plenty of room. All right, so just cut that knot right out. Okay, so we're gonna cut that out. So okay, so not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. Okay, so we can set that there, and this gives us some wiggle room so we can move it to just where exactly we want it. We'll just set this on to see. Yeah, that gives us plenty of room. Okay, so what I am hoping to do right through here, and this is the tricky thing that I've never done before, is I want to curve around this clock so it's not flat. And Masonite is too thick, it will break, especially when we're trying to go in this circular motion. I don't want to leave this open. I will if I have to. As a last resort, I'll put a cap on this and we'll just leave it square, but that won't make me happy, I'll be honest with you. So here's what we're gonna do. It's raining, but we're under a tent. And I really, really want to try this out. And what we're going to be doing is something called kerf bending. Let's see, I want to be able to see you. It's starting to fog up. Kerf bending is something that I have never done before. And if you can get pole wrap, that actually may work for this. They don't sell it at any of my home improvement stores here near me. I would have had to order it in. So I'm gonna try this kerf bending technique. And that's spelled K-E-R-F. And I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do. Basically, we're gonna make this plywood bend. So here we go. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we are gonna make a series of cuts against the grain. So this is the grain's running this way, we're gonna cut it this way. But we don't want it to cut all the way through. So what we need to do is lower this blade. It lowers pretty easily. And basically, we want to cut it right up to this layer right here. So now we've got the blade to where we want, and then we're just gonna run it this way, and we're gonna do that every 1/4 inch. And I started cutting every 1/4 inch. And this took me a little bit of time. My hands got a little sore. I should have worn gloves. If you do this, put on gloves. My hands got a little raw from the pushing. I didn't get like slivers or anything, but it just got over that repetitive motion. But I did it. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. And let's move it this way. And there is definitely some give in it. I don't want to do anything with this yet because I think when you do this, it's best if it's like pressing up against something, but we can see that it is starting to bend. But I'm going to flip it over and do this end because my table saw only goes out to like 12 inches, and so I'll get another 12 inches, and then we're going to have to like eyeball this in the center. So anyways, here we go. Oh my goodness, look at me. I don't know if you can see this. I am just covered in dust. This is real life here. So I just eyeballed the middle stuff, but as you can see, this is gonna bend. I'm a little nervous about it still. So I'm gonna be done for tonight. I'm gonna go take a much needed shower. But look at that. I think that that's gonna work. I'm gonna weigh my options about wetting the wood. I feel like it will, if we take it a little bit at a time. I don't know. I want to think on it. I want to get all this dust off. Oh my word, look at this. Oh, gross. Anyways, we're having fun, and now hopefully we've got something that will go around our top. But if you can find an alternative to this, I would. That was a lot of work. Okay, the DIY dolly needed to go on a walk. And this is what I look like. Walking dolly. It is what it is. It's real life. But I was still a little nervous that it was not gonna bend enough. Before I attempted to do this, the first thing I did is I kind of miter cut this on the edge, because when I met it up, I didn't want this like abrupt drop. And I thought if we mitered the edges on the kerf bended wood, that this might, you know, get it a little bit snug and tight. Before I attached it, I decided, and this was the suggestion of my husband, he's like, why don't you just soak the wood? I'm like, with kerf bending, you're not necessarily supposed to have to soak the wood. He's like, just soak it. It's pretty tight circumference that you're doing. So that was a good call. I did that. But I'm gonna tell you, this part really frustrated and stretched me. I'll caveat, it did work out in the end, but I was like, oh my word, this is not working. I ended up taking off the clock face and moving it up because I thought that that was the problem. My brain was just not understanding how it wasn't working really well. And so I moved it up. In so doing, it actually kind of messed me up on how the end looked, and I'll explain that in just a second. But what I did is I put a couple of trim pieces, cleats, and this was structural, but also to hide the seams a little bit better in the end. And so I wood glued and cut down these little pieces of pencil molding. It's like a little decorative molding that's pretty thin, and I wood glued and nailed that into place, and that was to act as kind of a support and a cleat, but also to create a natural decorative seam as well. So I kept trying to wrap it around and it just wasn't working. So then I soaked it again. It just was not going well. And then I had to go stop and pick my kids up from school. And while I was thinking about it, I'm like, you know, in all of the tutorials that it talked about kerf bending, you really needed a lot more support than I had on my top clock face. I mean, there was a couple of points of support, but not as many as I needed. So I took a couple of pieces of scrap 2x2 lumber, and I cut them down to the actual depth of the clock of where it would fit. And then I attached those in with some like toenail cleats and glue. I did end up adding a ton of glue in the seams of the kerfs, in between all the kerfs, and I felt like that would give it a lot more structural integrity when it was all said and done. And then I nailed it into place with our finish nail, and it worked. And I was like, phew, because that was the most challenging and difficult part, was getting that rounded element that I love. Look at that. We did it. Giving it that more stability totally was what it needed. So we're gonna let that dry. So now we need to attach our little wonky little frame. And I wood glued and nailed that into place, and that was good. Okay, so that was very challenging. It's always good to push yourself. I'm even pushing myself, because if I don't push myself, then how can I tell you to push yourself? It turned out good. Did it turn out exactly how I wanted? No, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so how cool is that we got this rounded? I can't believe we did this. And so that's a really cool technique. Maybe try pole wrap if you're doing this again yourself. But now we're gonna move on to some of the decorative elements, but how fun is that, right? Now we're gonna focus on the base and beef it up a little bit. And we are gonna take some plain wood right here, and we are gonna add a routered edge. Can you see that? Like a little decorative edge to this plain wood. I haven't used a router in, I don't know, like about 20 years, and I figured it was about time. So we are going to route this. I'm not a routing pro. I have done it before, and since we're doing a straight cut, it's a little bit different than if you're doing like stuff inside things, or on the outside. Generally speaking, it's on the outside you go counterclockwise, on the inside you go clockwise, I believe. It might be reverse, I don't know. But basically, when you do this, you need to feel like you're pushing it against some pressure. If it's going smoothly, then you're probably not doing it in the right direction. So that's just like a little tidbit that I'm gonna do. So we're gonna clamp this down, probably slide this out of the way a little bit, clamp this down, put a decorative edge on it, then we'll miter it and we'll wrap the base of this. And then I've got some decorative pencil molding that we're gonna do on the front face of this, and then it's gonna be priming and painting, and then completion. Then I cut them on a miter, and we had to do it on like the tilt because of how tall it was. You can't just put it upright and miter it that way. You need to lay it down flat. Tilt your miter saw and cut that on a 45-degree that way, just because it's too tall the other way to do it. But we wanted a nice mitered edge. And I glued and nailed those into place. And so then we had a nice decorative edge. Look at that. A little caulk and putty, and we will be in business. Now, if you don't have a router and you want to still build this clock, you could just take a decorative molding and put that on top of the flat one, or leave it flat, whatever look you want. And then I noticed on a lot of clocks, they had a little bit of decorative molding that kind of like a little scroll. So we did that effect right underneath the clock, and we are going to add some of these decorative elements in. So a little wood glue and some nails, put those into place. And then I took some of that same, I think it's like a pencil decorative molding, and I used my miter shears to clip that into place and glue and nail that in like a picture box manner on the front of the clock. And that kind of emulated, I guess, where you usually have a glass pane, but in this case, we're not doing that because we're not actually building a grandfather clock, more of a faux grandfather clock. Okay, this next part is uber important in any DIY project, but particularly in this. Dolly wants to say hi. She wants mommy to hold her. Okay, say hi. It's the DIY Dolly. She's such a good assistant. Okay. Oh, you're just the sweetest. I love you. Okay, so as I was saying, the next part is super, super important, is puttying. You want to make sure you get every single hole filled with some putty and then let that dry. Then you sand everything down really, really good, wipe it down, and then you want to caulk any gaps and seams like on the mitered corners if you feel like they're not tight enough. Where our base hit our box, we needed to caulk in there. Anywhere where there was any kind of seam, go in and caulk those so they are nice and tight, and then we let that dry. And you'll notice all throughout this, I was dealing with some weather, so it was really good that I had my canopy up, because at times I was working and it would rain and I just have to deal with it. That is Florida for you in the summer months, is it will rain almost on the daily, at least at some point, not all day long, but you know, at some point during the day you are going to be encountering some rain. And then once that was fully dried, we could go into priming. And so then I primed it really, really well, make sure everything is covered, and let that dry. And then you go back, and sometimes priming is really good way of seeing some additional imperfections that maybe you missed in sanding. So this is an opportunity to go back in and sand a little bit more to make sure everything is really good before you add your actual paint. And now we get to finally do the fun stuff. So I covered up the clock face the best I could. I taped it off really good and put something to cover it. And then we added our paint. And this is the same paint that I used on my hutch. I got a gallon for that, and it ended up being way too much. I hardly used any of it for this project, maybe like an eighth of the container to paint this. 3 coats of paint, and caviar is the color, and it's in a cabinet enamel, and this is really important. This will help with durability. I did 3 coats. I didn't video all 3 coats of me doing this paint because that would be a little monotonous, but you get the idea, and that was it. All right, how did I do on price? I came in right at about $100, but I do think that I could have done it a little bit less if I had used a 4x8 foot sheet of plywood. You may end up having to also tack on a little extra if you can't find a big clock face for $10, which was a huge steal on my part. So you could probably get this done for right at $100, depending on what you have in your wood pile, depending on what you have access to. I am thrilled. I absolutely love it. Is it exactly how I intended it? No, like the frame definitely juts out a little bit more than I wanted, but overall I'm just ecstatic, and I learned so much in this. I learned about bending wood, I reintroduced myself to routing, and I love it. It turned out so amazing. I am so proud of this. I hope it's something that stays in the family. I don't know, maybe I'll do a better version eventually down the road, but I love it. I'm so proud of it. I'm thrilled with this. And the thing that I hope you take away from this is to get brave, stretch yourself, and you will be able to do things that you never thought you could before, and you'll continually to become a better and better DIYer. And I love it. I know it's not like perfect work, but it's perfectly imperfect, and I love it so much, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, here's another one that I think you'll like as well. And to all of my DIY goddesses out there, you are more powerful than you know. We'll see you next time. Bye.